fellas. Oh, I have my Gmail open if you need to send any links.
Cool. Welcome to Justin Picks Stuff Up. It's our latest podcast here. It's I'm watching as Justin straightens things out.
I was trying to get this stupid thing plugged in, and it's being stupid because none of these goddamn outlets work in my stupid mom's house.
And our companion podcast, Justin Gets Irate.
Justin badmouths his mother's electrical sockets.
I'm telling you, your mom's got quite the DJ setup over there, though.
Yeah,
she's got some bass she's booming. That's
big
impressive.
PA.
There we go. All right, we're good.
All right, so I'm gonna let you gentlemen do the do.
Bryce, you're our third man.
Oh yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You're I'd call you the fourth man, but you're really the first man. So this is going to be our lineup here.
Okay. All right.
If it's cool with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
All right. Ready to begin?
Let me do test of vocals. Talking. Okay. Justin?
Hey, this is the voice I'm going to be using talking to you guys.
Great. Andrew?
I'm Andrew, and this is the voice I'm going to be using as I talk.
Fantastic. Let me kill this. All right. I'm ready to go. If you are.
I'm ready.
All right. Let me count you in. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to the Weird Things Podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Justin Robert Young.
Hi, everybody.
Now, Brian couldn't be here today, and instead, I would say that we've brought in somebody else, but this is the fourth member of the crew. This is the guy that's the glue that makes everything happen. For those of you that never listen live, you may not be aware of how all this happens because of Mr. Bryce here.
Hello.
And Bryce, say hello.
Hi.
And I thought, we're like, we need a third man. And I'm thinking, I know who the perfect person is. That would be Bryce. Bryce is the one who updates all of the links when we talk about stuff. He's pushing that through. He's the one that pushes on the website, our Facebook page, all that. Bryce is finding constantly all sorts of awesome, weird things. And
keeping it
we
weird.
wanted you to, you hear him out.
Yeah.
Producer would be a good one-word description for everything.
He's a lot more than producer, though. He's the blood of this machine.
He lives in our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Gentlemen. Women around.
Gentlemen.
Yo.
This has been a very exciting this last week in science, and I don't want to tell you just why. I'm going to tell you a story. All right.
Okay.
Two guys. One guy's name's Rick. The other guy's name's Steven. Rick and Steven. Steven and Rick, they have a hobby. And their hobby is they like to go into caves. They like to climb down into the bowels of the earth through strange little passages. And they were doing some caving in northwest of Johannesburg, Africa, of course, and South Africa to be more precise. And they're going through a region that's been a popular place for people to go caving. And they decided they would go a little bit deeper into where people haven't been before, or kind of a less known place. And there's a constriction in the cave called Superman's Crawl. Superman's Crawl because the only way you can fit through it is by holding one arm against the body and extending the other one above your head. Okay?
Okay.
So Imagine trying to climb like that, and then you have to climb up a rock wall called the Dragon's Back. All right? So, tight little passage where you can't even have your shoulder width apart. You have to be narrow enough to have one arm in front of the other and one arm in back of you. And they go through this. They go up on top of there, and then they find a little cavity, decorated stalactites, and deep inside, they find a fissure and a finger of rock, and then below it some empty space, and then further down they find a vertical chute, some places less than 8 inches wide.
Wow.
They manage, both these men are very slender, they manage to make it all down into there. They're described as having hyper slender frames, all bone and wiry muscle. Had they been, I don't know, podcaster sized,
Yeah.
they would never have made it. They would never have gone down inside of there.
So is this like, are they pro? Like, is this like their thing? Like they are keeping their bodies in a certain way because they cave, and this is an advantageous physique?
Yeah, this is an extremely skillful cave to go into.
Got you.
Now, do you know what they found at the bottom of that chute?
I mean, normally, all right, crazy stuff you find in caves: paintings, body parts, skeletons,
Treasures,
leprechauns.
You ready for this?
Yeah.
They found skeletons, not just any skeletons. Deep inside this cave, care to guess what kind of skeletons?
Ooh, so not human skeletons necessarily.
Yeah, like varmints, like raccoons or some small creature, maybe.
Do raccoons not like being called varmints, by the way? Is that
Yeah.
considered racist?
But they filed a complaint. All right, down at the bottom, they found Hillary's lost emails. Oh wait, Trump's credibility. Oh wait, I did both, so now nobody can be mad at me.
Oh man. Yeah, I feel like some sort of like a gecko, like a big gecko, or like a gator-sized creature.
like a Gila monster.
Yeah.
like a huge. Oh my God, like a dragon skeleton, some large.
The dragon's
lizard.
back. That's what it's called, right? Is it a dragon?
No, they did not find dragons, guys.
Oh.
Better.
Better than dragons.
I would
real
ask
dragon.
you to name the species, but you want to know what? You can't. You want to know why? Because if you don't know the story, this species didn't exist before these guys found it, and then the other explorers and later on the scientists and researchers went in there. Gentlemen, what they found was an entirely new species
Jesus.
of primitive humans. Homo naledi, Naledi, okay? And let me read the description of you, okay? The most important evolutionary find in human history in the last 50 years. That is what they found down there in the middle of the earth. And this is an area we call it the cradle of humankind because we found a lot of early fossils. And these guys kind of had a lookout, too, for the idea of maybe we'll find something down in there. And it's going to get a little bit more weirder in a second because let me pull up the description of this.
Picture here.
Yep. And so these species, they found piles. They found like 1,500 individual bones from this species of creature. It's very ape-like, had a smaller brain, a different kind of frame, maybe big hands. But what is peculiar about all of these fossils, all these bones, this is a site that could be as old as 2 million years ago, maybe 100,000 years. They're still trying to date it. These things aren't often as quickly as we would like. They're still trying to date this. They were deliberately placed there. Now, you saw the photo we saw was, or the recreation we saw was.
Ask.
What's that?
That's what I was going to ask, is because this feels like a tomb. Like now we would think of it as a tomb, but I was wondering whether or not, because this, I can't imagine geologically that things would have changed so much as these guys were to get in there with such tremendous difficulty, but it does seem like a place where you would drop bodies and just like leave them be.
So this is what's curious. So there's some great articles about this, and then when the scientists came in, like all the cavers that went in there to get them, by the way, after the fact, but it was like an entire team of women scientists and researchers were the ones that got it out. So, and it's like if you ever seen the movie The Descent,
Yes.
it's kind of like that with a happy ending. So, spoiler alert. So what they found down there, exactly, that's the curious thing, is they said it's not like a pit where, and like to get things into there, they had to go through this deliberate process to put it down in there. This was intentional burial of their dead. They only found a few rodents. They didn't find other animals that would indicate that there may have been some formation or some hole or some things got trapped and fall down there. For many, many years, this group, this tribe, or whatever we want to call them, let's call them a tribe, even though, you know, they're closer to us than probably what a chimpanzee might appear to be, but they're not fully what we look at when we look at other, like a Neanderthal. You put a Neanderthal in a business suit and, you know, you'd probably think, it's just some apish looking dude. These guys, you know, probably a little more monkey looking.
So let me ask you this. On the grand scale, from we are grouping together because we stay alive better when we're together rather than we're apart, to like using money as a form of society, where is burying your dead? Because I imagine in my head it's a fairly sophisticated element of a tribal society or of a civilization, that like we don't just, you know, somebody dies and you don't just poop on them, you know, or like, you know, kick them over.
There is, you know, burial rites or burial treatment it varies, you know, and it depends culturally. It has a lot to do with sort of your geology and where you live. If you're in like a really, really humid sort of climate, you want to bury stuff, you know, or cremate, because you don't want it sitting around and smelling, because you're going to smell it. Other environments, they might do, you know, they have where they leave it out in the open for, you know, birds or animals to come and eat it and get whatever. When you have a lot more space, a lot more wide open area, and you can put it up in places to do that, that's tradition. Other ways, so, you know, it depends upon what you think is expedient. If you leave a lot of bodies around in some places, you might start getting predators, and that could be a reason. And so here, it's even in today, it's based in part on practicality, just as it was back then. But the idea of, hey, let's go put this all the way down inside of this cave, it could have been ceremonial. And that's what's spooky, is the idea that 2 million years ago, we could have had a hominid species. You know, again, an entirely different species that could have existed. We've talked about this before. 100,000 years ago, Homo sapien, Neanderthal, Denisovians. You had Homo florens, the little hobbit-looking dudes living near Indonesia. Okay, another group called S, which we haven't quite fully identified. Red deer cave people. That's 6. Now we can probably maybe add, you know, Homo nadali. Okay, it's another group. That's 7. That's 7. And this 7th one we did not know about until because only reason we know is because quite recently 2 guys went into a narrow 8-inch passage to look to see what was down there. If they hadn't done that, we would not know. We don't know what else is out there, but we can imagine 100,000, 200,000 years ago, our world was filled with all these different people who were very different. Trollish looking people, gnomish looking dudes, you know, tall dudes, small dudes. There were species of Homo erectus that were like 7 foot tall, while the average, you know, our ancestor at that time was maybe 5'3" or so.
Man, this story, the Caver story, just so much better than Stand By Me. Like, suck it, Wheaton. This is the best.
It's a great novella by Stephen King, though. You can find it in the collection called Different Seasons, along with Apt Pupil, Rita Hayworth, and Shawshank Redemption, and then I forget what else.
So you mentioned that they found some 1,500 bones. Is that right?
1,500 specimens representing at least 15 individuals: skulls, jobs, ribs, dozens of teeth, a nearly complete foot, a hand, virtually every bone intact as in life.
So it seems like this is part of, like, even in modern civilization, we find crypts and places where bodies will reasonably stay intact for as long as they are until they they quote unquote disintegrate kind of naturally. Like that's something that we do. It's why we bury them in cool ground, and why, you know, crypts are in cool areas. Like, this does, and obviously this is us reading into, you know, what we have found and kind of assigning our own sort of narratives to it, and we need to remove ourselves scientifically from that. But it does bear a resemblance to this very modern way of thinking how we treat our dead, or at least an idea that has stuck around through modern era.
It's if you talk to a primatologist and you ask about, when you teach an ape sign language, it can readily grasp certain concepts. Other concepts seem to be alien to them. You ask a gorilla what happened yesterday, and a gorilla will look behind them. You know, yesterday, tomorrow, all that. These are really, really vague notions. They live very much in the moment. They have memory, and they form these things. They look forward to stuff, but they to our understanding, in their head, they're not building up mental models of what they're going to do. There's an interesting research where researchers put a tape recorder in the crib of a young girl who was maybe 2 years old, but she was verbal. And when nobody was there, this little girl starts to talk about, well, mommy's going to come get us. Mommy's going to help us change into our clothes. And then we're going to go have breakfast, and I'm going to have applesauce. And then I'm going to go to school, and then I'm going to do this. The girl recites her entire day what she's going to do. And that's not all that weird. And you listen to little children talk, and you start to understand they have these ideas of things they're going to do, where that seems uniquely human or maybe hominid to some degree. And when we look at burial and all these other things, we're trying to find out how do they see the world. The mirror test. You put a mirror in front of an animal. What does the animal see? Higher level animals, dolphins and some types of apes will go, hey, look, it's me. And they start mugging for the mirror. Other animals get nervous and scared of it. Put your cat in front of a mirror. They may not care. They don't see a face. They don't see anything. Or they may, they just don't really see that it's themselves. The mirror test is a really good test of intelligence. Or not a really good, but is many of the signs. Burial rites, that's what we look to see, like Neanderthals. We want to know, are they smart? And we look inside there and we find Neanderthal graves. We might find flowers. There's this red ochre, this dust, this powder that we'll find in there that seems to be symbolic. There are these little things that we look for to say, did they have some concept other than just cover it up?
Right. So
that's fascinating.
Right.
And good on these dudes.
Wow. Yeah. Now,
there's
how extensive has the research been on this the fossil site so far? If they've only found, say, 15 individuals.
This is a featured story right now. The research is active to try to start dating it. So this was when they decided to release it. Right now, going through all the little bones and trying to figure out which individuals. They've uniquely been able to identify 15 range of different ages. The next step is the better they can understand the conditions that these things were preserved in, they can start to get an idea of how old they are. But just to tell you just how uncertain it is, one of the leaders of the team, John Hawks, who I've been subscribing to John Hawks' RSS feed for about a year now. Prior to this, I had no idea he was working on this. He's got a great blog about evolution and explaining whenever there's some new report comes out, whatever, I go to his site. I found him when I was doing research on Neanderthals, and he had really good insights into it. He says that it could be 2 million years old, and it could be, 100,000. And so the find just got reported September 10th of this year. Here's the description. With a small head and brain, hunched shoulders, powerful hands, and thin limbs, Homo naledi was built for long-distance walking, says Hawks. Fully grown, it stood about 5 feet tall, was broad-chested, walked upright, and had a face, including a smile, that was probably more human than ape-like. Powerful hands imply it was also a climber. So, again, we don't know it. 2 million or 100,000 years, could be coexisting with humans at the same time. But we would have humans at that time that looked roughly like what we look like right now, and those dudes with the faces you saw. That's shaped so much of our psychology, the way we're hardwired. We're hardwired to think of others as being very, very different, very, very, very different. And as we just sort of ended up, becoming the dominant species and then commingling with Neanderthals to the point that, they went away or died off, and just only 2 to 3% of their DNA is in, people of European or Asian descent, and we became the one species. Some of that hardwired biases or whatever still were left over, and I think we just apply that to other groups that actually genetically were just the same.
That is a fascinating idea that we have always been programmed to recognize and separate the other. That there is an evolutionary concept to that. Like,
Mm-hmm. And we don't know how much did we trade with them. What was our interactions with them? Did we keep to ourselves? Were we very, very sparse? There are a lot of accounts when you start reading, like when Alexander went all the way from Macedonia into India, and you'll find descriptions of forest people and descriptions of things that sound like they might have been another species of human, which is curious. And there are a lot of accounts of that where there could have been small pockets and small tribes of these individuals living a lot longer than we realize. We only know where we find fossils. We had no idea this existed until a couple of years ago, or quite recently, these guys went into a cave. This could have been an entire history that just was an entire species that never would have been found if nobody found it. We don't know what else is out there, and we don't know what else lasted in very remote regions.
it really drives me crazy when everybody gets so like aggressive about like thoughts on science, because like not all of it. Every scientific concept always has the unless ... right? Like like we know everything that we know, unless something comes along that makes it totally different, and like that's what it's, to me, it is the most fascinating and rad part about it, is that like this is the game for which the rules get rewritten constantly. All we got to do is find new rules.
We've had this, and we've had to adapt that even, I would say that maybe when I was in school, we had this idea that there was the long continuous line from modern day humans to whatever we, earlier forms we adopted from. Maybe Neanderthals were part of that, or maybe that was an offshoot, and that was kind of it, and it was just this, then this, then this, then this. And now that we understand that it's just this shrub of all these groups coexisting at similar times, and that's what made it confusing, is we're like, we think we found an ancestor because it dates back to the right time. Oh, hey, guess what? Not everything that lived 200,000 years ago or a million years ago is related to us. We may share an ancestor, but they might just be country cousins.
It's like,
I mean, and what's interesting is, what was the footprint of this particular species, the one that we found in the cave, when we had no other record of it, except for this, fairly small burial pit. It's not like they found, hundreds and hundreds of things in some mass grave that they had been putting people in. Seems like a fairly small group of at least what we can identify. So that's fascinating.
We'll get into a second, but Bryce, you were going to say something.
Oh, I mean, I was going to say that the overlap of all of these different human-like species makes, so, I don't know. It's really interesting thinking of like fantasy literature with all of these very human-ish species, like Tolkien, all operating sort of at the same time with their own history and their own lore, and how that is sort of becoming a little bit of how we are viewing humans and human-like species as potentially overlapping and coexisting at different times.
And that illustrates a point that's actually a theme of a book I'm working on right now, and that we went from, the Tolkien based his stories, or a lot of his lore, on Scandinavian and Germanic lore, which is filled with elves and trolls and other creatures, and then, little forest folk and all these things. And as we dig deep in, and for the longest time, like, yeah, those were fairy tales. And then, science tells us, the view then was, we had one ancestor that we evolved from into this, and then now we've come to realize, yeah, that's true, but there were cousins and lots of cousins, and they're all living at the same time. It wasn't like one dominant species at a time did this, and that within the scope of modern human history, in the last 100,000 years, and pushing back, we think Neanderthals maybe died out 40,000 years ago. It may have even been more. It could have been other species that lasted longer than that. There may have been lots of them, and that's where those stories may have started from. And we talked about this before in the last podcast, Göbekli Tepe, this maybe 10 to 15,000 year old structure that's in the middle of Turkey, that's a actually manufactured, built thing that dates back to far beyond. You pick up any book, like I'm listening to this wonderful audiobook about ancient civilizations, and this thing's is about 10,000 years older than anything in there. And so it doesn't take you too far to get a couple more generations back to when there were all those things you talked about living around there. And it very much is probably what inspired so many of these stories.
Fascinating.
Yep, absolutely. Another thing that's interesting is you take somebody like, you ever heard of the historical figure Sargon, right? Which we're talking back in, Sumerian, Akkadian times. And this guy is just one of these first great military leaders that we know about his battles. We know about his conquests. We have a pretty good idea of where he reigned and what he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have never found his city. We've never found the actual city that was the city that he ruled from.
So we have record of it. We do not know where it is or what
we find in other cities. We'll find cuneiform tablets describing his accomplishments. Okay, and there's masks and things like this, just testifying to what this guy did. It started the entire dynasty, the Akkad dynasty. Okay, even had a chess game named after him. Okay, and as it pointed out on the Wikipedia right there, archaeologically, we've never found the capital. We've never found the center of his empire.
That's insane.
And there's,
it's got to be. I mean, we have guesses, right?
We have sort of guesses, but then when was the last time you discussed the Elamites with a friend of yours?
Not so often, Andrew.
Okay.
I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay, when you had the Sumerian civilization, the Sumerian was a bunch of these different kind of kingdoms and places where you then got the stories like Gilgamesh and whatnot. You had other groups like the Elamites that they didn't leave a written record of what they were up to, okay? The Harappans, Mohenjo-Daro, okay? Mohenjo-Daro is this amazing complex in India, right? They've got drains, they've got indoor toilets, they've got these pretty sophisticated towns that they built, and it makes a lot of sense if you're kind of advanced and you're in a place like that that's got heavy monsoon seasons, all that, you want to get rid of water. We thought that maybe there was Harappa and there was Mohenjo-Daro, these two ancient cities. We're like, oh wow, look what they did, that's kind of cool. We found the remnants of 70 of these kinds of cities, not all the same size or whatever, but of this culture. But there's no written record. We didn't find any tablets or whatever of what they did. We have found actually some records, but we don't know how to translate any of it. We have no idea what they said or what they're up to. And you think like there's an entire, at one point we only got one or two, but back to the other point, Justin, you talked about the footprint. What was the footprint of Homo naledi? Now we could say we only found this one small cave of them. Maybe that's it. One of my favorite examples is the chimpanzee fossil record. The last million or so years of chimpanzees, you can fit every single chimpanzee fossil we found inside of a shoebox.
Wow.
Because they live in marshy, wet jungle environments where you just don't get fossilization unless it's some rare extreme circumstances. Now we know chimpanzees have a long history. We can look at their genetic history, but when it comes to their fossil record, it's non-existent. So I get excited when we talk about places like Doggerland, which is the region between the British Isles and Europe, which was once above water. When you talk about periods that were like during the Ice Age, which lasted a lot longer, and most of the water was stuck up in glaciers, and we had coastlines extended much further out. Whatever was living out there, whatever evolution happened among there, in the reeds and the marshes or whatever like that, it's gone. We'll never know.
Yeah,
probably. So,
dude,
weird,
that's
guys.
Insane. Because also, you had to wonder. So, where was that? I mean, was this a special destination? To honor revered dead, or was it like the worst? It's like, oh my God, they suck so bad. We're gonna put them down the cave.
What if they were possessed? What if they were the ones that had the instinct, or these are the ones that started to show a glimmer of intelligence that were just a little bit beyond, and they're like, no, we need to put you there.
Oh, jeez. I'll tell you what. If you are really, really smart and you want to find a tiny little cave on the internet for which you can honor your respects, then go on over to patreon.com/weirdthings. That is where you are able to support this podcast. 453 patrons already do it. Why don't you become one of the selected few? Patreon.com/weirdthings. We thank you for your support, and it gives Bryce a reason to come on out and
To
help
live.
produce the show.
This is my
Which,
slag
by
it
the
out.
way, not an easy job because Andrew, Brian, and I
Are jerks.
are we're major league butts.
No comment.
All right, no, this is where you say no, you're not.
Oh,
Guys. Come
I
on.
mean, you're not. You guys are
All right.
great.
Oh, he didn't want to lie.
So yeah, is there anything else in the news of the weird, Andrew?
Well, I've got a couple more news of the weird. I got not so much news weird, but a little bit of disappointing news. I had the pleasure of, well, I think it was last December, going to the first test launch of the Orion crew capsule. I was invited by NASA as part of the program NASA Social, and we got to see a rocket take off with the Orion capsule, and then this thing went up, and the Orion capsule went around twice and then landed. I didn't see that part because I was in Florida. And it's an exciting thing. This is this capsule that we want to make part of our future into space, the NASA future into space. Unfortunately, they have postponed what was going to be the first crewed mission, which originally was supposed to take place in 2021, which I think puts us at, episode 9? Anyhow, 2021, I forget where we are in the Marvel universe, too, with that Phase 4.
Sure.
2021, that was going to take place there, but then they've moved it back 2 years to 2023. They say after a design review and based on how much funding they have, they've decided it's going to be postponed to 2023 before the first time we get to test this new module.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So here's where we get into what is maybe the canonical discussion of this podcast, specifically as it results to space travel. Because I gotta wonder, right now, that Orion capsule, really, really cool thing. You gotta wonder how cool that's gonna be in 2023, where with the like gigantic momentum that SpaceX has, or maybe SpaceX is they blow up a few more rockets and this time somebody's inside of it, and SpaceX is no longer a company by 2023, which I guess is what the slow and steady win the race kind of idea. But this seems like we are missing our window for this thing to be super cool and relevant. I mean, 2021 seems like that.
Yeah, or at least the scale of it, right? Like at that point, you could expect either a larger payload or a more crew to be able to go. If you let it slip 2 more years.
They're not going to change much of the design between now and then. That's not the way the government works, and that's not the way NASA works, and that's not the way generally space works. And you have to have that balance. And part of the problem, the challenge that NASA has to deal with is they have to figure out what they want to be making 5 years from now when they go to Congress and ask for money, or 10 years from now to ask for money to fund for something. And and run the risk of, well, next year they may not fund us, and so this project we put this much effort into. And you look at how many times this has happened. Like, you look at the James Webb Space Telescope, what the original cost was, and then what that thing finally, the final amount that it looks like it's going to cost. It's incredible, and part of it is just bad planning, but a big part of it is just unreliability of Congress and consistency of there. But and just the inevitable problem of bureaucracies. And listening to this audiobook, which I mentioned before about ancient civilizations, they talk about just, how the Sumerians were frustrated by how big bureaucracies became and how they began to crumble and fall underneath the weight of them as more and more public officials were on the payroll and more people were getting, the number of taxes that were being levied on, the fish you caught and all these other stupid things, and people who were, the inspectors of wild game and all these other things that just created this big, huge monolithic government that was, this is 4,000 years ago. They were faced with this problem. They couldn't get anything done. And, somebody might come along, and it doesn't go away. And when you're trying to do something as complicated as space travel, you don't just have the technical challenge, you have that. And yeah, it kind of looks like by the time they finally launch this thing, they'll be waving at SpaceX as SpaceX is coming back from, Mars.
Yeah, and that's it's just you want to know what? It actually is kind of the benefit, like you feel kind of bummed because 2021 and 2023 and 2023 is it is being delayed until then. You never know how far that delay is going to go. It feels like a long time because we have such amazing momentum right now it is.
So that's 8. So what they're saying right now, in 8 years from now, we will see the first new crewed NASA operated capsule. 8 years from now. It was approximately 8 years from when JFK got up on stage and said, "Hey, let's go to the moon," that we went to the moon. And so we're now in a position from just strictly within the way the limitations NASA has to deal with, the way the government works, etc., that we're saying, it's going to be 8 years before NASA, without the aid of private enterprise, will put, private enterprise. I mean, these are private contractors and all that, but the official NASA spacecraft, we're 8 years from being able to put a man on a NASA spaceship.
So the argument would be because NASA is underfunded and we don't take space seriously. But in reality, a lot of it is, I mean, obviously JFK in initiating the space race, or America's participation in it, was kind of a special situation for which he had a tremendous amount of support and political clout. But like this is kind of just the way of the world when it comes to government space program.
Yeah, and I would say, there are arguments to say that NASA also has a problem of mission creep, and that NASA does a lot of great and amazing things, but NASA's become a big science organization that does a lot of things that don't really feel like they fall within what the original purview of it is. And we can make arguments for monitoring climate change and weather, and these things are absolutely important and things that need to be done. Do they need to be done by our space agency? Yes. Satellites are in space. That is technically true. But, is that all of a sudden making this, Apple does great things because Apple says, we're going to have very, very simple products. We're going to make very simple products. Google does search brilliantly. Everything else Google tries to do hasn't had the same level of success. Same with Microsoft. Microsoft, made a operating system that could work with a variety of desktops, variety of environments, variety of situations, and solve a lot of different problems. They do that really well. Other products they've tried to make haven't been as successful. And they've had some, Xbox been good, but there's the history of these companies when they try to get outside of, when Apple tries to get into, social media stuff. What's that?
Web services. I mean, Apple.
Apple Web Services. Is still, they're trying their best to make Siri super useful, but you still run into these issues there. You see that when they can say it's something we can put in your hand, you can hold on to, it's great. But when it's got to rely on everything else, not as much. Tesla makes cars. SpaceX makes spaceships. Elon Musk has not merged these two enterprises together with Solar City to try to create one super awesome company, because he's going to put Glenn Shotwell over there at SpaceX, and she's going to do a great job. He's going to have his team at Tesla and his team at Solar City, and that's part of the problem you get into, is that a lot of the people running NASA, there are people who are a lot of scientists and stuff run it. They may not be the best people to figure out how to do procurement and how to get a rocket up into space. They can tell you what to do with it, which is great, but anyhow.
Well, and you got to wonder whether or not that, we got The Martian coming out, which has a very heavy theme in, it is a very pro NASA story, but it is very critical of NASA's bureaucracy and the what I will paraphrase the opinion of the author based on his work, that it is NASA's bureaucracy that holds it back, not necessarily the people within it, which is, I think, what has kind of been our point on this show. I mean, we've gotten kind of a rap of being, anti-NASA, but it's like
not at all.
It ain't about NASA. It ain't about the people. It's just about bureaucracy, and layers, and the stuff they have to deal with.
It's like we've talked about that, kind of like the way Microsoft. Microsoft has got some of those brilliant computer scientists in the world, but they're stuck in a model of a company that existed in the early 1980s and did gangbusters in the 90s, but 20 years later, trying to adapt has been problematic. And brilliant people. Google, same thing. Brilliant people, but how do you take these other awesome things and bring them into reality? The core of Google Glass is a really cool concept. and Google Plus and these other things they wanted to do. You go like, yeah, there's a really cool thing there, but there's so many interests that come into play. And the same thing with NASA, like, well, yeah, our department's going to want a piece of that budget too, and we're going to need to have this oversight, and then we needed to do X, Y, and Z and this, and then, I want to make sure that I can keep my staff here for this amount of time. It's frustrating, but the biggest champions I've seen of SpaceX have been in NASA. And, we have Jeff, and get exciting news is Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, won their patent they tried to enforce, saying that SpaceX couldn't land a rocket on a barge, got thrown out. That was just dirty tactics. And I love Bezos, and I think Blue Origin could be exciting. This is another company. They're trying to build a reusable rocket ship. But they've announced they're going to be building in Florida. They're going to be building the Space Center there. They're going to be trying to develop their own private technology and working with NASA, et cetera. Overall, amazing time.
Insane. No, it's great. And to be honest, this is what we should be frustrated about. As opposed to just kind of the pat. I feel like if this story happens 8 years ago. And it's like, oh, well, this crazy NASA technology is now it's not just 6 years away, it's 8 years away. You would have kind of gotten this chorus of like, well, that's what it takes to make space. And it's like, now we're not. Now we're like, oh, look, there's other people doing it faster and they seem to be going quicker. And, how long was it from them announcing the Falcon Heavy to them launching a Falcon Heavy in the upcoming year? Like, it was only a span of years, like 3 years, not 8 years.
Right.
We haven't seen the Falcon Heavy launch yet, though.
Yet, theoretically, but it's on the horizon.
So yeah. My question is, with sort of SpaceX and Blue Origin acting as head-to-head competitors, right? Is NASA a competitive force for these third-party companies, or is there an element of staying out of NASA's does SpaceX or Blue Origin have the motivation to make an Orion-like capsule within the next 8 years?
So what you're likely to have, SpaceX has the big leap on that. You have other enterprises too, like UL, United Launch Alliance, whatever, and they're ones who are traditional NASA contractors. What you're probably going to see, I suspect, is the Boeing. There's the Boeing CST, crewed capsule, I think, is another one. I think more likely it'll be SpaceX or Blue Origin because they're okay with kind of using mad money to go spend let's try to make something. I suspect yes, you might see that there might I guarantee you somewhere in El Segundo, California, on a drafting board or in a computer system, that Elon Musk has access to, there is a description for the Dragon, the third generation Dragon crew capsule, which will be much larger. I'm sure, because he wants to go to Mars and he's not going to wait for engineers at other companies or other government organizations to design this stuff. He will design this stuff. There's a program a project which some NASA scientists, I understand, conceived of a couple years ago, and it just got resurfaced again, and that's called Red Dragon. And the idea there is to take what's going to be an off-the-shelf Dragon capsule. And Dragon's the capsule that fits on top of the Falcon, for those of you that haven't been listening to us for several years, is to take the Red Dragon and then to outfit it with scientific equipment. Again, take an off-the-shelf thing like the thing we saw at the factory being made there, put some equipment into it, and then put it on top of a booster that can do a Mars-level trajectory, and send this thing to Mars, let it land there, grab some rocks, and have this sucker take back off the surface of Mars and fly back there. They think this could be done by 2022. We could launch it by 2022. We could actually do a recovery mission of taking material off the surface of Mars and bringing it back to Earth.
Wow.
And when's that other capsule supposed to launch?
Well, that'll be with people, but that'll be a year after.
Oh.
But that shows you there are scientists, there are engineers at NASA going, hey, these guys are figuring this thing out. We would love to use this.
That's the beautiful part about it, is that that they are to say to NASA, which again, best and the brightest, among the best people to do it, are working at this organization and working for our interest, to give them more tools to do what they do best is never a bad thing. And this is there are questions like you mentioned, Bryce, about like, well, okay, well, does Massa doing it hinder private enterprise from wanting to build something that would compete with it? But I think at this point there are singular missions for people like Bezos and Musk to tick off the boxes on their space goal list, and they will do that at any personal cost, and then finance their dreams based on selling that kind of technology to other people who want to use it.
And like guys like Larry Page and Sergey are obsessed with the progress of SpaceX. So you've got the two founders of Google, you've got Elon Musk, you've got Jeff Bezos, and then you have other players with an interest in it, who are absolutely committed to seeing something happen. You have people with access to just build, NASA budgets something around like $20 billion a year, give or take, or whatever. There's the amount of private capital that's actually interested in doing this now is colossal. Things are going to happen. And we've talked about before reusability. Once SpaceX is able to, get that rocket back down on the pad and send it back up, that's going to be that. Somebody described it in the chat room as a Sputnik moment. It's a boom. There are points in human history when we developed things like, special kind of keels, or the ability to, measure our distance as we traveled across, from being able to do longitudes, etc., that changed the way we looked at, the world around us, and that will change the way we look at our solar system. Picks?
Let's pick it. I'm listening. This is a little bit more candy. I'm sure Andrew's got some really substantive, awesome stuff that's going to make your life smarter. Here's a really, really fun book that is a very unique nonfiction entity. I think Andrew and I have talked at length about how frustrating we find biographies, and specifically when there is like really 60 pages of a biography, and then there are like maybe another 100 of context that really doesn't move the story forward. Or the other big problem with biographies is your story you're telling is informed by the sources that you get on the record. And ultimately, that's who when you present, here's the story of famous person. It's like, well, that's really the story of famous person told by some family members that maybe like him or don't like him, an ex-wife who's, says is fair, but always just giving her perspective. You've seen this a lot with Steve Jobs specifically, because, there was a Steve Jobs that kind of existed before he left Apple, and then kind of after he came back, that seemed to be different people. I'm reading a biography called Johnny Carson that is fascinating. It is written by Henry Bushkin, who was his personal lawyer, and it does everything that I want this story to do. It makes no claims to be anything else other than this one guy's perspective. He obviously has a tremendous amount of respect for his client for decades, but also is fairly frustrated by him. It is all written from the perspective of, hey, look, this was all stuff that was attorney-client privilege. I waited 10 years after he died, and now I'm going to, just because it's a fascinating story, I'm going to get it out there. Wow. And it is beyond all that. It hits all my bases for what I want from it kind of journalistically, and that it gets right to the point. There's no 3 chapters about Henry Bushkin's life as a child and how he always loved the cinema. Like, it's just what you want. It is him telling stories about Johnny Carson in chronological order. It is awesome so far. And just, how can you not love stories of a totally blotto Johnny Carson who just found out that his wife had a secret apartment with Frank Gifford, telling him, Frank Gifford plays 3 positions when he suited up for the Giants, and I couldn't get Joanne to do more than 2. It just amazing stories. Johnny Carson's a fascinating figure. I highly recommend it. And in terms of the audiobook, it's not read by the author, but it is read by how you imagine a attorney born in the Bronx would sound, and so it is authentic in its narration, and is just fantastic. I've had a real fun time with it.
I've heard about this, and I have hesitant towards it because the fact that it was Johnny Carson's attorney doing this, and yeah, the privilege expired, but it's like, man, but yeah, this is stuff that Johnny never would have wanted you to tell. You're the one person that he legally never wanted you to tell this sort of stuff about, and that kind of leaves just a sour taste in my mouth. I'm biased too that I did my after school program, of which I got to meet Mr. Justin Robert Young, and that was funded because of a grant Johnny Carson, while living, gave to the James Randi Educational Foundation to encourage my projects in schools and teaching critical thinking. And so, it's sort of a weird thing where I think of so much what I've been able to do has been because of the generosity of that guy. But I want to know his life story.
Highly, highly, highly sympathetic.
Yeah.
Telling. He has a tremendous amount of affection for Johnny. I don't know if in the book there is a rationalization beyond that this is just something that I wanted to say, but it is listen, it's certainly something that Johnny probably he was a tremendously private man, and he probably unless later in life he had questions of legacy and having that cemented on some level, maybe he I don't know, maybe his thoughts evolved on it. I'm not going to pretend like I know what Johnny Carson would have thought about it, but I will say that I don't believe it is to be unfair, and I think that I am comfortable with him telling his version of this.
I'll probably listen to it. Have you listened to the Hope biography yet?
No, not yet.
I highly, highly recommend you check out Hope, Entertainer of the Century by Richard Zoglin. It is an amazing story of a guy this is a guy that went from performing in dance halls. We hear about, he started in vaudeville. No, he started way before vaudeville. He was doing dance halls, little theater, then vaudeville, then doing Broadway, theater shows, radio, film, and TV. This guy made all these different jumps from one medium to the next one as one died out and one became popular. No other entertainer has ever done it like Hope did. No other entertainer was able to adapt and evolve like he did, to the point that people say, why are you still getting on stage? But it's because it was his calling. Bryce, do you have a pick?
I'm not much of a reader, but there was an album that came out this year that has really mystified me. I listened to kind of a weird collection of music, so I don't usually find entire albums. When I think of entire albums, I want consistency in sound, consistency in thematics, and musical aesthetics. But when I first heard the lead single from this that came out in 2014, not only did you have a very unique modern sound, but also very interesting lyrics. It's kind of a pop song and a pop album, but it has a very personal depth, and it doesn't feel base or banal. And so this is called "The Fool" by Rin Weaver. It came out in June this year, and I just think it's spectacular. It's probably it's one of a handful of albums I've ever listened to that I can enjoy start to finish, front to back, every track, anytime. There's an interesting meta story going on. It's not a concept album in that it's trying to tell one linear narrative. It's a very interesting cyclical story of, at least the way I interpret it, of this character that wants to be a free spirit, living on the road, living life to the fullest, who continues to just sort of end back up in the safety of whether it be a romantic partner or just settles down eventually. There are clues that are hidden in between each song. So like there's the very beginning of the album starts with this melody that ends up being this end tag near the end of the album. That is like this almost like it it sounds like it was recorded on her phone, but she's sort of singing it sort of wistfully near the end of the album, and just the whole I don't know. I don't.
What genre would you put it in? Listeners also liked like what kind of acts?
It's mixed. It's mixed because you've kind of got the radio singles, which are sort of pop with a little bit of like hip hop flair. If you know Benny Blanco, he's produced like Kesha's stuff and Katy Perry, but also Michael and Angelikos. He's the lead singer of Passion Pit. I think Passion Pit is probably a good similar sound.
So melodic,
alternative and acoustic pop.
Gotcha.
There's one song near the end that sounds like Landslide. Like I listened to it and I think it's Landslide Part 2.
Yeah.
But then you've got this other stuff that's got these really interesting vocal effects. And at the end of the day, not only is it something you could enjoy front to back, but it's also just something I can put in my playlist of all of music I would just like to listen to. And so that's my pick. Is
cool. Our first music pick ever on Weird Things.
I know.
Really?
Jeez. Yeah, I think it's definitely.
It just got hipper around here.
I know.
Yeah, guys.
I guess because
we like music too. We're cool.
Like really,
Just
I mean, like
two
Andrew,
guys having a good time. Having a good time.
I guess it's one of those things where I don't talk about music all that much. You know,
You're
Andrew.
super into it though.
What was that?
But you're super into it. You're super knowledgeable about it.
I mean,
you have your own taste. You have. Like,
I try to keep up with what the kids are listening to. But yeah, no. I mean, Andrew, you have. Yeah, certainly. How would you describe your music taste? I don't want to go out on a limb or anything.
I'm very, very eclectic, but then, I'll hear something and I'll get into it and be like, I remember when, and it's going to sound like, when I heard Lorde on like a college station when that first broke, before, it was like that summer, whatever, before she broke, I'm like, oh, this is really cool, and then like Ellie Goulding, I'm like, oh, I really dig this. I'm not into like, Basement Chimpanzees. Those guys are great. Like I don't pretend to have any kind of insider knowledge. There's things that I like and then get into it and then I go, oh, this is kind of really cool. And then I can get into stuff that just, it's very hard to predict what I will like because, somebody mentioned I only listen to Kraftwerk. Yes, that is true. Autobahn is the greatest song ever.
And Brian almost exclusively listens to
fundamentals,
Australian rap music.
Yeah.
He has one hip hop album that he only has room in his heart. He has a one hip hop album shaped hole in his heart, and he takes one out and replaces it with another.
I'll say this, like I seriously like. I think Taylor Swift is great. I genuinely, because like as a writer and as somebody who loves to really good storytelling from a point of view, you listen to one of her songs and I'm like, Blank Space, all that stuff. I mean, this is like it's like, it's enjoyable. There's a story there. She's telling a narrative. Yeah. She's a bit of an angry chick, and a bit psycho, and she knows that. I mean, these things are, I dig that kind of thing,
What's
and then
fascinating with Taylor Swift stuff, and I was thinking about this because I saw some television thing where she was on a list of like most powerful people in entertainment, and usually the list is like people who have just amassed gigantic fortunes, and she's certainly not as rich or in like big executive positions like a lot of other people on the list, but she earned her position because she had taken such big stances with Spotify and with Apple Music and was proving to be a very pivotal figure in what will obviously be the new economic model for music in general.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating because it's like she only has that power because she's a great pop songwriter. Mm-hmm. Like if that album that she just released comes out and it's not good, nobody listens to her. She can write on that Tumblr, all day long, and no one's going to care.
Well, that's true of every celebrity, and
certainly
but
so. Yeah, and I think what happens is some slowly parlay. They are successful enough that they make their way into executive capacities, and I wouldn't be shocked if you saw Taylor Swift do that.
Her letter to Apple about the Apple the Beats One and the streaming and not paying people the first 90 days, the way she wrote it, the way she explained how it really affected the younger, the independent artists, whatever, was a master class. She and whoever her people, and maybe she I'm like, I don't like her people. Maybe she wrote it with some assist. Maybe or she just wrote it. I think she's very bright. It was classy. It was the way to handle something and say, hey, I don't agree with what you're doing. I'm not going to call you a jerk. I'm not going to call you greedy. I'm not going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you why I like you, but I'm going to tell you why I think that maybe you need to be over here instead of there. And it was wonderfully done, and it was a great example of how I think, other than you look at people who, we want to be outraged, we want to be angry, we want to take power to the man, and she said, hey, you guys do awesome stuff, but here's the problem I see with this.
Well, and it was also shrewd, I mean, because I agree with everything you said, but that essay was titled "Why I'm Taking My Music Off Apple Music," and it started from the position of I'm gone if you do not address these things, which is a sign of somebody with power that this is how you move something is by me.
Well, there's a reason we paid attention because of that, but she made sense, which most of those people do not.
No, absolutely. 100%, 110%.
It's also indicative of how powerful whether it's her negotiating skills or whatever, but she's the biggest pop star on the planet, and she's technically an independent artist. Like she's if you compare it to like a Beyonce or a Drake, she's not tied to one of the major record conglomerates, which is kind of it's a boldness to reject. Obviously, there have to be some sort of offers from these companies, but to say, you know what, no, I'm actually good on my own, and to be able to pull it off is it's a sign of her power.
Well, gentlemen, let's jump right into after things. So I'm going to say it's been weird. Cool. It's been weird.
It has been weird. 5927. Great. Let me write this down, and then we'll jump into that. Do you guys need a break?
No, I'm cool to go right into it.
Okay.
I think I'm cool to roll into it.
Great. Give me one more second. 20.
Ah.
Great. All right, I am ready over here.
Somebody wanted to know how fun was it to play the High Sparrow. I wouldn't know. I wasn't the High Sparrow. He just showed up.
I've had people that have known Andrew and I for years that were like, was Andrew like having a bad day? Like, was he like pissed off or like? I'm like, no, that's a thing. That's why it was great. It was amazing.
Have you seen the show?
Yeah.
Did they know that I spent the entire half hour as people walked in there cleaning the stage?
No, that was not missed.
Was it? Yeah. I am next to BB-8 with my Apple Watch.
Yeah, I do. I love that photo of you three guys and how indicative of just kind of everybody's position in the wedding, of Andrew looking real stirred and Brian just being head totally cocked back in laughter.
Yeah, my favorite was I'm reading the vows and they're hilarious, and Brian's going and then Brian just hit elbows me like, isn't this funny? And I just go. He's like, oh, you're still in character. He's like, we're on stage. It's like yes, I'm committed to this bit.
Oh, that's so great. That's so amazing. I'm so excited that wasn't gigantic disaster. I'm still counting house money.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was nice and tight, and hey, it was funny.
Where is that?
It was funny. It was funny.
Ah, right. Thank you.
All right, so I'm ready. Do you want to count in? Do you want to count down?
Yes.
Okay. Going live for After Things in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to After Things. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Justin Robert Young.
Hello, friends.
And it's not a guest, he's the producer, he's the guy that keeps things rolling around here, Bryce.
Hi, it's Bryce here, holding down the fort.
Yeah, well, After Things, I've got a topic for us. This is where we talk about what it's like to be a creative, and I just spent a couple days, and thank you very much. I'm at Britt and Brianna Winter's house here, using their theater here, and she brought me a water. Say hello. Come on, we can lean in. You can say hello. You may have remembered her from the wedding as the
Hi,
Red
Britt.
Witch.
Hello.
In and out. Can't hear what they're saying. Hopefully it's
That's
good.
fine.
Yeah, no, they can hear you say that, though.
Okay, good.
So here's the thing. I was at the Boing Boing Weekend of Wonder, which was really awesome. It was at the Mission Inn in Riverside, this huge, awesome, sprawling Mission hotel that's got, it has rotundas that go 6 stories. It's got catacombs. It's an incredible place. I did a workshop on how to get out of a straitjacket. Taught regular folks how to do it. It's very, very cool. It's put on by Bob Self, who does Baby Tattoo, which is this really cool art house publishing company. And just a lot of great different things that were going on there. It was a fun thing to be a creative person. But while this was going on, I was following a little bit of the brouhaha. There has been a major disturbance in the online force, I guess we could call it.
Okay.
And it's one of these things that we're all kind of aware of in the background, but it's been causing a lot of consternation. And that is with the Apple with iOS 9, the latest version of the software for the iPhone. Mm-hmm. They have made it extremely easy to go onto the App Store and download an ad blocker for Safari, for mobile Safari.
That's right.
So what's significant about this is the fact that mobile is the largest area of growth for web searching. And if you want an ad blocker right now, it's pretty easy when you do it on your desktop if you know what you're doing and you know what you're looking for. In mobile, there's been a lot of stuff in Android and stuff and a lot of kind of patch and go kind of stuff, but default kind of things, it's not as been as easy because Google serves their own ads and tracks you anyways. Apple putting this into there, making it very easy for you to put these ad blockers in there. We don't even get into the tracking, but just the idea that you can get rid of a lot of ads on web pages has caused jubilation from some quarters, frustration from others, and it's going to be disruptive.
So let's drop the sides, because as Andrew pointed out, this became very, very contentious very, very quickly. If you are pro ad blocker, you cite the fact that on mobile, and I think this is probably the reason why Apple decided to make a move, ads can very often feel like viruses. They open up different apps, they direct you to places, they make it feel like your web experience is being not only intruded upon, but you're being redirected to places that you don't want to go. It can kind of make your phone seem insecure by the way of some of the apps. So that's Apple's idea. Meanwhile, on the other side, and where you saw the greatest wailing and gnashing of teeth, were a lot of these companies like The Verge or Business Insider or Vice Media, stuff like that. We're seeing this article from Nilay Patel of The Verge entitled "Welcome to Hell," just in case you wouldn't have an idea of where he's on, what side he's on. But they say, hey, listen, this is the only way that we can give you free content and to have very robust ad blockers that take out all of our ability to prove impressions to advertisers, we can't function. You are killing our business model, and they feel kind of attacked from both ends, from Apple and Android in terms of now making ad blockers very, very readily available, and then on the other end from places like Facebook, which seek to take their content and repurpose it in Facebook's interface without you having to visit their websites and see their advertising. Bryce, I think you had a bit of a reaction to this on Twitter. I'm very glad that you're here for this discussion.
Yeah, well, so I did read that Verge article from Nilay Patel, which does make, I think, a really interesting point in that ads are a major revenue source for these outlets, and as ad blocking is very normalized on desktop browsing, as it becomes more normalized on mobile browsing, you're definitely going to see, especially on these big outlets, a hit in revenue. But on the other hand, let me pull up my Twitter, because I took some screenshots from The Verge the day that article went out, and it's no surprise here. This is theverge.com. You type in theverge.com on your phone, and the very first thing you get is a full screen advertisement for the new Galaxy phone,
The Edge Plus and the Note.
Right. And then on desktop, I've got a widescreen monitor, so you go to The Verge, and it's like a proportional thing. So it stretches to fit the size of your window. So literally 70% of this screen is filled with a Galaxy phone ad, and then the content is at the very bottom. I feel like there's some backlash there of just like, you guys really kind of screwed this up lately. It's making mobile browsing, it's hurting the experience of mobile browsing to the point where it's becoming necessary, at least on some level.
Let me check for a moment. I'm a publisher. With Justin, we have iTricks.com, and we have our own ad network we run ourselves, which is blocked. If you use one of these blockers and you go to iTricks.com, you're not going to get our banner ads. You're still going to get our sponsored posts. Those things will come through. And I'm totally cool with that. I'm totally cool with that, because part of the problem is that if you go to a website, part of the problem isn't just the fact that somebody wants to sell you stuff. It's the way that it's been done. When you go there, it's like, with the ad blocker, that sponsor thing that's come up. Part of it is you don't know who the ad. How many times have you gone to a mobile site and all of a sudden had the App Store open?
Yes.
Because and I go to websites that people I like. I have friends that have websites I go to, and all of a sudden, whatever their ad network, all of a sudden, I'm popped over into the effing App Store because you let some script run on there you should not have done.
And it's not just scummy apps. It's Uber and it's Candy Crush. It's these big mainstream apps that are doing this.
Which that behavior feels like a virus. It feels like my phone is compromised.
You have the videos that automatically start playing when I'm on mobile trying to get a signal. Then all of a sudden I watch a video start to load, and I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I can't get the rest of the page load, whatever. A number of times I have actually intentionally clicked on a mobile ad, probably zero. Number of times I've tried to click on something else, but because of some tricky JavaScript, it all of a sudden jumps down on you or whatever, or because the framing isn't quite what they do. Several. I put a link, I actually emailed a couple people, because CNN will run these things, they'll have these, they look like articles, and they had, check out this brain supplement that Stephen Hawking swears by. And it didn't say advertiser above it. It had advertiser below it, but I took screen grabs. It did not say advertiser above it. It said it below it, and you click through, and it takes you to what looks like a CNN page. It even has this bogus URL of cnnweb.com, blah, 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 whatever, okay?
Right, so the original link was cnn.com-news.report, and then you go to the full link, and it takes you to a Lulu's women's fashion.
This got covered. I'm glad to see that. Because that was... And CNN can say, well, it's a third-party thing. Yes, you traded your... What's that?
We do have the image of it, though.
Yeah, I got screen grabs of it, too, and it's this thing where CNN traded their reputation to a third party who then let that be used for this. And that is, to me, dishonest. When you see those things below, those faux articles like, oh, check this out, if they're not clearly labeled, that's just, I don't mind, if you like, the discussed boxes or whatever, check this other thing out by Pop Quiz Fun 101, find out what these celebrities look like this. Like, that's junk, whatever. If it's marked, sponsored, whatever, that's fine. But when it's not, technically it's against the current FTC rules. 2, it destroys their reputation.
So
let's a quick primer before we get into kind of our larger opinions morally on this, because there's an exceptional story about the number 1 app for this and what the creator did with it after launching it. But this is what we are seeing now on mobile is the screaming and yelling of what is effectively a dying industry. Display advertising is in dire straits. They are not effective. We are moving technology away from a point in which they are, really something that companies want to put their money in. And there's a reason why, the Verge, Nilay Patel, to speak for him, would probably say to you, Bryce, yeah, we do gigantic display advertising that have boxes in which you can click to get out of it. And that is where we will go. We will go for big, gigantic, you need to see it display advertising that you can click out of, because we don't do the JavaScript, like tricky boxes and blind redirects and stuff like that.
Sure.
What the bottom line is that this is just where we are with display advertising. It is hard. It is fundamentally, we are through technology reshaping the way that products are offered to us. And this was a paradigm that's been around as long as, Gutenberg.
When Justin and I launched iTricks, we talked a lot about advertising, and we made a decision that our goal was we wanted to do a blog that covered magic news, that covered that world, and we knew that it was never going to be a super huge thing. We had an understanding of how big something like this could be, and it wasn't going to be very big, but we looked at what the size of the ad market was, magic magazines and everything else like this, and we had an idea of like, okay, we can create a business that'll be this size. If we try to get scummy and do things like find out how to do this magic trick or do this stuff, or we became those, yes, we can make it bigger, but we wouldn't be doing what we want to do. We want to cover the news, and and we created a business model based around the idea of we're not going to use outside ad networks. We're not going to use Google. We'll sell our own ads internally. And as we saw display advertising become less and less viable, and because it wasn't as we did more sponsored posts, and because it's exactly on topic for what our people want, it's worked out really well. And as Michael Lauk has pretty much taken over most of the day-to-day on it, it still has good traffic. It's still a nice small little business. But we weren't going to try to blow it up into something big. And what you've happened with The Verge and these other places is they're competing in a very, very dense field to tell you the thing that you're hearing somewhere else. And they are desperate to get whatever ad dollars they can, because their audiences can very quickly go elsewhere because there's nothing special to offer.
Right.
So let's get into the moral conversation about this. Marco Arment.
Marco.org.
He, who has done some great apps before, had a app called Peace that was his ad blocker. It became the number 1 app, paid, right? A paid app, number 1 seller or downloaded on the App Store. It was absolutely gigantic, and within 48 hours, he took it off because, as he cited, which for folks who have followed him, the phrase drama queen is the first one that kind of comes into my mind, but he is certainly a dramatic guy. He very, very dramatically said that this is something he doesn't want to have on his conscience, that it wore on him very quickly to decide what was a good ad, what was a bad ad, what was a good site, what was a bad site, what kind of ads should be good, what kind of ads he should allow, and he wound up letting it go. You could say conspiratorially that a guy who gets his message out very much through sites like The Verge and Gizmodo and Business Insider. He is somebody that as often his opinion is covered and his apps are therefore succeed, that he might have poisoned the well with his relationship in terms of the rest of his career by way of making himself public enemy number one with a lot of these sites. But he decided to take it away. We'll take him at face value that this was weighing on his conscience. Andrew, what was your reaction to that?
I immediately had to go to the iTunes store and ask for a refund because I thought I bought it. Bought it to support it because I thought here's a guy that has a lot of deep experience. This is a guy I think he did Instapaper, or he's had Instapaper. He did the magazine. This is a guy that's been in the coding side.
Right.
He's a guy that's in deeply into different areas of creating content and all that. And to see him create this, I thought was interesting because I kind of look at it like, all right, this is the step to the next version of where we want to be.
Yeah.
Following, and I think that you don't know what it's going to be like until you find out what it's like, and so I understand that. It's frustrating to see him go launch and saying, I paid my $3, and then 2 days later he's like, nah, I've changed my mind. Like, well, okay, I don't want to pick on him too much, but I think there's a lot of frustration from people like John Gruber, who does Daring Fireball, and he makes very good passionate arguments for why we want to have these sort of ad blockers for certain kinds of ads, as he points out. And his frustration comes into it as these ad blockers block all ads. So he uses two kinds. He does sponsored posts, which are great, which is a thing that we do. And then he has things from an ad called The Deck, which is a very ethical, very straightforward ad network that doesn't do tracking, doesn't do all the other deceptive sort of things like that. The Deck is blocked on his site. Yeah. And he's a little bit frustrated by that. But he shows a really good article from Coy Vin. If you want to click through on that, and it shows, it's just this, we're watching a video, and this is Covin is explaining, he went through a New York Times article to explain, it's all about enabling of ad blocking, and you can't read the effing article because the ads that pop up on there stop you from being able to scroll down the page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this happens constantly.
Yeah, this is why I put ad blockers onto my thing. I put ad blockers on there not because I'm cheap and I don't want to look at your messages, because so many sites were unusable and forced between not going to them or opening up links and not knowing, or just enabling a blocker and to read it and to let the more subtle things go through. That's fine. I was a bit pushed over the edge by CNN and using those things that weren't marketed as, advertorial or whatever, that were deceptive. The deceptive stuff drives me crazy.
Do you think, this is a side jag, but I don't know that I feel like that CNN stuff could be a third-party sort of bad actor, not CNN thing.
It is. I'm sure it is. But they gave them the ability to do that.
Yeah.
They didn't police it. And I don't think that was CNN. I don't think that was CNN, intention. I don't think that's what they wanted to happen. But that's the consequence of what happens is when they gave another party permission to put stuff on their page, guess what? This is what happens,
That's also not an excuse. I mean, I can see, every once in a while and I think this is something that we might have matured out of, but 5, 6, 7 years ago, you used to get, the one day blog kerfuffle over a story about domestic violence that has next to it like some crass Google ad or something, and you would see those kind of oh, look, this ad's on this. And now I think we've kind of matured out of that. Every once in a while, a thing like that, okay, whatever. It's the internet, especially if you're working with Google, sometimes you're going to have stuff like that. If you're CNN, that's not an excuse. If people are gaming your system and devaluing your content.
Sure. You don't know who, and it's not just what's coming onto your page. You don't know what they're tracking, what information they're looking at. Is that ad network looking, noticing that, man, Bryce is clicking on a lot of things that have to do with head lice. Bryce is clicking on a lot of things that have to do with,
we should target razors.
Are they, Bryce has this weird unhealthy fixation on peanut butter, and so all of a sudden somebody has that information. And when we go into the web, we know that, but that's the thing, you're also bringing in these third parties we didn't know. If you go to iTricks, I think we have Discuss as our
Comment.
for
Comment system, yeah.
comment system. And Disqus, part of the deal with Disqus is that they're going to plug through and put these weird screwy sort of like, hey, click on these links, whatever, like that. Be honest with you, I don't know what tracking they put on there. Other than that, other than whatever some worm or malware got in there, we're not tracking you or doing anything else other than within our own little ad network. You go to Weird Things, we're not doing that. We're not really advertising much there, but we're taking responsibility for that. And I think that what's going to happen is I think the middle ground people are going to hurt. The Verge and a lot of these other ones are going to hurt. New York Times and these other sites are going to have to start rethinking it. I know CNET was putting up like a banner on their thing if you used an ad blocker saying, hey, we can't show you this article because you have an ad blocker on. Great. See you later, guys.
I think you've seen, and I don't know whether or not this was on purpose or not, but a friend of mine who had an ad blocker when using Imgur, you did not get your social sharing tab. If you had an ad blocker. So
some ad blockers have that built in. You can say, don't enable this feature. That's like in Crystal or one of the other ones. That's a thing like I think that was a piece was like shut those things off too because
those are also those also have their own little tracking things.
And I don't download stuff illegally. I'm not a guy trying to get stuff for free. All my iTunes videos, I saw that iShift price. all my videos, everything I have is things that I buy. I'm not a guy trying to do that. And I don't mind paying for content when it's worth it or whatever. I would pay for more subscriptions from like bigger newspapers if it wasn't just outrageously priced. I hesitate on clicking through because like half the New York Times articles I read of my 10 per month limit, I think are were accidental clicks or whatever. I would pay for a New York Times or an LA Times subscription if it wasn't outrageous. I used to subscribe to Wired magazine, but then it was the issue that killed it for me, and I have a tremendous amount of respect, but it was the Nerdist Star Wars cover crossover. It was seeing Hardwick on the front with all of my favorite Star Wars characters. It's like, no, you just crossed a line. Give him his own cover, but leave my Star Wars alone.
There was a friend of all of us, very once frustratingly made the point to go ahead and just. You can count on your hand the last 10 years that we have had a Wired cover that isn't a white guy or a robot. That it's just if you eliminate just the white guys and the robots, that maybe one hand you can count the covers.
Yeah, that's a good point. But anyhow, I think that this is. I thought we'd bring this up as a topic here because. We need to evolve. We need to adapt. And, we do our podcast here supported by Patreon. And that's not a thing that scales for other enterprises, but there are other ways to support it. But also maybe the age of let's have the big conglomerate with the big, huge ad networks is going to go through disruption. I think, on iTricks. Yeah. I mean, we don't really push our banners on iTricks anymore. We're more, it's become the sponsored posts. And we don't get people complaining about them because usually it's the kind of thing people want to know. We couldn't, I have, I know it's hard for I have friends that do movie blogs and stuff, and I've watched all of a sudden pop-ups pop up on them, and I can't go to certain sites like the Collider because just the ads make it intolerable. Mm-hmm. I'll look at the RSS feed and I'll see what's new or interesting, but I rarely click through because I can't get to the article. And
I mean, this has just been something that's been on the horizon for a very, very long time. And when the web was young, we saw the advent of incredibly annoying and intrusive banner ads. That kind of receded as there seemed to be a sense of like, hey, listen, this is young. More people are going to come here. Display. Don't worry, display advertising. Everything's going to be all right. And it is for niche. Niche has done very, very well on the web. We for iTricks, it especially in a niche where Magic, where advertising is very often content. People love to see trailers for new products and stuff like that. There is certainly a market. But like you said, you have this whole class of publishers that are all just launching as many verticals as they can, chaining as many 18-year-olds in Manhattan to desks as they possibly can, so they can all write headlines and about something that they find on Reddit, and those are where you're seeing the squeeze. And I think it is no coincidence that they all reacted like they just got shot in the leg. They're all screaming like homeboy at the beginning of Reservoir Dogs.
They on one, they had that fear of, because of Facebook, as Facebook's garden, the walls of this garden extend further and further out, that they're going to lose that. And that was warned about, don't give everything into them. I trust, Facebook wants to make a good product. I don't use Facebook Messenger. I don't use that because I don't need another chance for them to market to me and tabulate me. I don't participate in Facebook all that much because I felt like the moment they say, oh yeah, no, to reach your followers, you actually have to pay to do that. And that wasn't part of the original transaction. I thought that was dishonest and shady, but I still use it because, my publisher and my people, want me to do that. I do it, not joyfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think of when I think of sponsorship with these outlets, the one kind of website that I think I like the way they do it, and I don't know how sustainable it is. I actually like the way Dig has been doing advertisements since they relaunched as like a curated sort of news aggregator. Is they've got these kind of tiles of news articles, and usually right here in the corner they'll have a sponsored ad or like a MeUndies thing or something, and it's not the kind of thing that an ad blocker will hit, and it's not intrusive like some sort of display or some sort of popover, and I actually like it. It's more visible as a consumer of what's in that space. But that's one ad, at a time.
Here's the point. Mm-hmm. We need to evolve. Advertising needs to evolve. Mm-hmm. We have seen part of it. We will see more of it, because the idea of get yourself in front of the public by any means necessary when we have increasing controls over our mediums is just not viable. And that's what we're seeing.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity here for, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, and Jeff Bezos, through his Amazon and through everything else like that, what if Amazon came out with a browser, and what it was is, through all of the websites that participated on this, it was going to be almost minimal ads, or you're only going to get an ad in one part of the screen, which is going to be something you could buy on Amazon. But it was part of, a subscription thing. You pay $5 a month, or you pay this or whatever. And the idea that then all the sites that participate get a portion of it or something, or specialized content. You get into like a Netflix model, essentially, would that work? I don't know. I have no idea. And I think, but there are different ways in which you can try to make these things
that would basically be an ad network that consumers would subscribe to turn off, is what it sounds like.
I'm just because I use Amazon, I lock myself like, well, maybe I'd have Amazon products or something, but it could be like, but if you took Google, or again, Google's the biggest advertiser in the world, some third party that's not primarily invested in advertising, that said, hey, we're going to build, we're going to make a deal with all of the New York Times, all these other people like this. You pay us a flat fee a year, and there's going to be an entire network of sites. You're going to have a better experience. You're not going to have the ads. You're not going to be tracked or whatever, but you're going to still get paid.
But what is the consumer motivation? Because, the only way I could imagine someone would want to be a part of that on the user side would be either if there was, I don't know, a deal like this, like some sort of browser only, like in the Amazon example, some sort of browser only price. Like, I don't know why anybody would want to use that product.
Well, again, I'm imagining imagining, again, there are people out there that use Popcorn Time.
Sure.
And there are people who use Netflix. There are people like me who want to do the ethical thing and would like to compensate people for the content they create. Mm-hmm. And if I could be in an environment where the content was presented to be just purely for the content and not the editorial and purely from that, I would want to participate on that. Most people aren't like me. I know that. Are there enough people to sustain that?
There's something to be spoken for quality. That it's just a good, well-built app that I'm able to curate better. I haven't had an RSS feed since Google shut down Google Reader. Mm-hmm. I would love And maybe it's a world in which we have a third party that aggregates a bunch of places and makes sure that they get paid. And maybe it's something like Flipbook or what Flipbook kind of aspired to be, that I'm able to pay for the experience that I want to be informed and just be on the right side with the people that gather the news. I like that. Like the WWE Network. You can get everything that you could have gotten on the WWE Network either on YouTube or streaming on whatever site, and some of it, the YouTube stuff, they left up. WWE just decided not to file a claim against the 1997 Bash at the Beach, but it was there, it existed. You could find it. You can find it online. You can find it on mobile, but the app matters. The app. I can just go to the app. I have a search bar. It could be better, but it's good enough. I can find it. I can search by various people. It's just a better experience, and I'm happy to pay a subscription price for it.
Well, with something like news, is there a way to is there a way that content, which is timely and in some cases disposable, is there any way to make it worth the while to enrich that media so that there is a similar feature set to?
Well, no, I mean the key would be,
that's a tough thing. It's so saturated that there are.
Yes. But that doesn't mean that there's not a different way to look at it.
Sure.
My primary way of interacting in the world is Feedly. When Google Reader went away, and I thought that was a colossal mistake on Google's part too, because I think that they could have really created, and they did that, as tablets and everything else started to become more and more popular. Feedly is a lot like, Apple just launched Apple News, which I think on the phone looks cool. It looks good, but on the iPad, I hate tiled, when all the things are tiled across and different things. It's not readable to me, because I just like to scan down.
Sure.
But that being said, I thought RSS I thought was great, and it didn't take off because it was still a geeky, techie kind of thing. But you look at the way people consume news and Facebook and other things, it sort of is like that. There still could be an opportunity for that. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of different answers. But would I participate in, would I pay for something that was going to be tailor-made to a lot of my tastes and stuff if I knew that it was, curated? Maybe. It just got to be good, though. And how much good I go to... I'll go to medium.com 3 days in a row, and there's just nothing. There's nothing I care about, And this is supposed to be really curated, specific kind of content. You go to Mashable, and you go to this. It's so much. It's 90%. It's the same thing everywhere.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned, because I use NewsBlur for my RSS. I use it, all the time, every day, basically. And it's not a free service. I use the premium tier because I have so many feeds. Partially because the experience is great on the web and on my phone and everything, and so I'm happy to pay for the experience of getting this content, but I generally wouldn't pay for any specific feed. Like I probably wouldn't pay for access to
that's
Boing.
actually what kicked me out, or what made me part of what did not take me to another RSS readers, because I had a lot of these technology sites on there, and it was like the same thing that Andrew was pointing out, that it's just like it was hard to, it's like, why do I have an RSS feed if I'm sifting through so much crap, like everybody repeating the one thing about iOS 9 that no one's paying attention to, it just. Yeah,
but then I think about the content that I do intend to pay for, and I don't know if you guys know about Giant Bomb, but in the already extremely saturated world of video game coverage, these guys do quick looks and video features and podcasts, very barely any actual journalism, article writing content. It's a lot of video stuff. And so it's not exactly the same niche that a New York Times would do, but as someone who does appreciate content that I enjoy regularly, that's actually something that I feel good about supporting, and feel like I get I don't just do it out of the goodness of my heart. I actually feel like it's a good transaction happening.
Well, and that Giant Bomb have been much like Rooster Teeth, have defined themselves based on their personalities,
right.
and they are selling the relationship that people have to the personalities that they have cultivated, and they've done a really, really great job of keeping them together and giving them the freedom to do what they want.
And their
that
content
ultimately
is less disposable than news.
Yeah.
It's a little more. It's more timeless.
news is universal. A relationship you have with somebody talking about the news is very, very personal, and often you want to go through great distances to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at, and I think that's what you talk about. It's like when it's brand, it's personal. You take a brand like Vice, which has become a monster brand. It's it's in TV, it's in documentary, it's web. They're like, hey, we're gonna cover. We're gonna take what was that the weekly. In a really good city alternative newspaper mentality, done by maybe people who are, a little more credible and a little bit less crunchy all the time, but they're still crunchy, but still, and do some cool stuff. It became a really cool thing. You look at Vice headlines and you're like, man, this is interesting. This is real journalism, where part of the problem with bigger, New York Times, a lot of these other enterprises have is they have staffs. They have a big staff, and they're covering a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of people who care about these things as granular. And then they start getting into these blogs, and then trying to get into these special, like, we'll have our own political coverage, et cetera, and all that, which may work, may not. But crunchy means kind of hippie-ish, or granola, for the people in the chat room who are wondering. But it's when your brand doesn't mean anything, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, the marketing of our personalities is something that I think we have all thrown our lot into that concept is the more that everybody can know who we are, know what we're about, the more that they will be interested when we want to make a fair transaction of goods for services.
My advice to people out there worried about this future is, if you're creating something that anybody else can create, anybody can pick up, get a product and do a review. It may not be a good review. It doesn't have as much value unless you have a lot of insight and expertise to bring into it. When there's a new product, new software, there are certain things like the Ars Technica reviews are going to be really good. There's a handful of people who do amazing jobs. Everybody else does not. If you're doing something that's so easily done by somebody else and probably will be done by a machine algorithm in 5 years, you're not going to be happy. Find that special little niche. Carve your own little space out of there, and you're going to become essential.
Right. Though I guess maybe that's not a saving grace for the entire industry as a whole. I don't know if that is something that necessarily.
Well, but what
will scale
industry?
to,
Are we talking about the advertising industry? Are we talking about the blog industry?
I guess the blog industry.
The blog industry.
But,
listen, there's a lot of this is going to mean get better, more relatable, more writers for which people have a connection to, and that might mean moderating your writing style. That might mean that not everything needs to be a Disney princess quiz. It's something that is an evolution. I mean, I'm very good friends with someone I've known forever. No, I've been watching Donald Trump stump speeches for the last 2 days, writing for The Contender, and now I just feel like I'm just falling into these like very Trump. He's a great guy. I've known him for years. He's an amazing guy. But Steve Kovac at Business Insider, now at Technology Insider, their new vertical, we've talked a bunch about how much Business Insider really started out as like the spammiest of the spammy of everything being a slideshow and spreading out 2 sentences over 9 page views. And that was something that they had to evolve out of, that they said, this is hurting us more than it is helping us. We can't, that might be good for us now. It's not good for us in 2 years. Now, they still are, they have a lot of practices that I find very annoying, but this is the game. The game is create these very interesting places that have news value that people want to get. This has always changed. This is not new. Newspapers have evolved into blogs. Blogs have evolved into RSS feeds and video features, and we've all found different ways to get your message across. This is just another evolution. It's an important one because it means that much in the same way that newspapers found themselves disrupted when their content went online for free and they wanted to sell advertising and per paper, now it's the other way around, and the advertising is having a problem while the content is designed to be out there for free. So it is curious.
But it's also like, bloggers were the ones to crow about the death of the old media, and didn't realize that their time frame was going to be even shorter. And that's, Business Insider is a brand that says if they have more credibility, then they can do things like conferences. TechCrunch was a brand that got into a space that was sort of initially overlooked, but then tried to delve deeply into it and build up a reputation of a brand, and then became an acquisition target for other companies. Said, well, they do a really good thing well. They've got a particular kind of reporter that do a really good thing, and they can do disrupt. They can do conference. They can do other things that are bigger. And one of the biggest businesses in the '90s, it was $1 billion business, was Comdex. Was the idea of, if we know why we have people's attention, then we can do something with it. But not everything gets to be that. And it's not, nobody's future is guaranteed.
Nope. Death haunts all of us. It is lurking behind every corner. Good night.
It's been after.
Good shows, guys.
That was good.
Yeah.
I really liked that episode. That was fun.
Thanks for having me on. This was.
Thank you for being on here. We appreciate it.
I hope.
Yeah, dude. Tell you what, I am. I hate to after and run, but
I got to do it too. My battery's
I
about
gotta
to
roll.
die.
Okay. Well, I will talk to you guys later. Email me about Night Attack this week, Justin.
You know me.
Thursday would be a really good day.
Is that good for Brian?
I have no idea.
Your work is with Brian. It's
Okay.
not with me.
Gotcha.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
That's how we do. All right, let me save this thing. How are you guys doing today? This was so weird. This was great. I was worried I might be a little a little too quiet, but I think it went well. 5920. And what was do we have an estimated time when Cord Killers will be? I believe it will be around 10 Eastern. Oh, thank you, Tandagasa. Yeah, I definitely felt more at home with the After Things stuff. I've been following the ad blocking stuff really closely. I didn't pick a title for the show, did I? Let me see. I'm just gonna steal one. There's somebody. Okay, well, I'll just say Bryce Gibbs. Oh, thank you, Serge, and thank you, SCOTUS, and Travis. You need my best lounge voice. I don't do voices very well. So if you couldn't infer from that last little bit with Justin, Night Attack will not be on Tuesday this week. Really can't be on Monday. It might be Wednesday or Thursday. We gotta see what Brian's shooting schedule is. This is actually how I speak all the time. Oh, I need to turn the settings off. Why would I clear it? It'll clear itself. Right? Does it not clear itself when I turn it off? Well, whatever. I'm sure Beatmaster clears that before they do DTNS. Okay, yeah, so be on the lookout for Court Killers in possibly about 3 hours or so. And then, yeah, Night Attack will probably be late this week. I'll update the calendar once we get a good idea, but I think hopefully Thursday, maybe Friday will be a good day. I don't know, but then at that point, it's really getting late in the week, and it'll be close to the next Tuesday. We'll see. We'll see. I'll talk to Brian after court things. Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting if, well, I don't know. But thank you guys for checking out the show. Thank you for checking out this little bit of after things. I will catch you guys in a little bit.